Welcome to a broadcast of the recent Lorain County Commissioners' General Meeting. Unless otherwise announced, meetings are held Wednesday morning at the Administration Building, 226 Middle Avenue, 4th floor, downtown Elyria. These are public meetings and you are invited to attend. Agendas are posted prior to the meeting at www.loraincounty.us. Click on Departments to see the Commissioners page, then click on View Agenda.
Okay, can we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning and welcome to the February 11th meeting of the Lorain County Board of Commissioners. We have Ms. Beitelman here for our prayer before our meeting.
Yes, thank you. Father, we ask you to guide and govern everything with order and love today. Look upon the commissioners and their staff and fill them with the spirit of your wisdom. May they always act in accordance with your will and their decisions be made for the peace and prosperity and well-being of Lorain County. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you.
Good morning. Welcome to Lorain County Board of Commissioners, Wednesday, February 11th, 2015 meeting. Commissioner Kokoski has our dog.
The warden says he likes treats, so we're going to give him a treat. He's just a pup. He's only about 6 months old. He wants to go hide with that. You got to come out here and let everybody see you eat that little cookie first. Look, so sweet. Basset Dachshund mix or something. We're not real sure, but very sweet personality. He will be available on Saturday if you want to come down to the dog kennel and pick him up. We have 12 other dogs, so you can look at those on Facebook if you want to pick one up for your family, bring him home, make a good addition to anybody's family. Little sweetheart. Look at that face. That is a face. Oh. Madam Clerk.
Under Resolutions, number 1, investments.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Ms. Kowski.
Aye.
Mr. Lundy.
Aye.
Mr. Kalo.
Aye.
Appropriations.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Ms. Kowski.
Aye.
Mr. Lundy.
Aye.
Mr. Kalo.
Aye.
Transfers.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Ms. Kowski.
Aye.
Mr. Lundy.
Aye.
Mr. Kalo.
Aye.
No advances, no repayments, requisitions.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Ms. Kowski.
Aye.
Mr. Lundy.
Aye.
Mr. Kalo.
Aye.
Travel.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Ms. Kowski.
Aye.
Mr. Lundy.
Aye.
Mr. Kalo.
Aye.
Bills.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Ms. Kowski.
Aye.
Mr. Lundy.
Aye.
Mr. Kalo.
Aye.
Authorize various personnel actions as indicated on the summary sheet for employees within jurisdiction of Lorain County Commissioners.
Mr. Cortez.
Thank you, Madam Commissioner. I do have a number of personnel issues I'd like to discuss with the board, and also pending and ongoing litigation, also potential sale and purchase of real estate. All three topics are allowable for executive session discussion, so I'd ask at the conclusion of our regular board meeting today, we go into executive session, we talk about those three items that I've explained. Thank you.
Thank you.
Approve and waive the reading of the minutes of February 4th.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Ms. Kowski.
Aye.
Mr. Lundy.
Aye.
Mr. Kalo.
Aye.
Authorize payment of $1,000 to Boyer and Cool Home for Funerals, Lorain, for indigent veteran Randall Dennis Van Hoen, Lorain, in accordance with the Ohio Revised Code 5901.25.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Ms. Kowski.
Aye.
Mr. Lundy.
Aye.
Mr. Kalo.
Aye.
Approve and enter an agreement with Richard L. Bowen and Associates, Inc., Cleveland, in the amount of $1,033,285 to perform architectural and engineering services for Lorain County Transportation and Community Center, passenger rail platforms, and pedestrian bridge project to be paid from the construction professional service account or contract services account.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
Actually, for just a minute, Jim, I was gone this weekend with the regional councils, but Grace Galucci and I were talking about additional tax credits, additional toll credits.
Right.
And I was explaining what our shortfall was in our discussion points, so, but it looks like we'd be able to acquire from them
Well,
additional.
NOACA, the toll credits that we got directly from ODOT.
Right. But we do have availability through NOACA also.
Okay, yeah, the state has indicated to me strongly that if the project gains enough traction, that we should revisit the issue.
Okay.
I think they gave us enough to get us moving in the right direction and left the door ajar to come back later. I got the sense that they didn't want to fully fund this project because we weren't getting traction for a while with the partners. So I'm comfortable that we should be able to complete this project without a lot more additional local monies. Now, we've had this talk out here and people get confused. When I say now local money, I'm talking about our money.
Right. General fund.
General fund money. There may be some need, but I think the need is going to be minor. I think we're going to be able to close that gap using local match dollars from ODOT and NOACA to cover those costs. Regardless of whether the project goes forward after we do this work needs to be done so that sometime in the future, if funds become available, if we're not able to get that funding, we have a shovel-ready project. And as you know, over the years, shovel-ready projects are the ones that get funded. Everybody else gets behind the long line. So we got to at least get into that mode. So this is a good expenditure, and it's not requiring any local dollars to get to that point.
Well, we had a lot of discussion spending 5.5 hours in the airport waiting for my flight to finally get undelayed, so that came up.
Well, hopefully you lobbied heavily for our share of those dollars.
Yes.
Yes, I did.
Use your time wisely, right?
Yeah.
Ms. Kowski?
Aye.
Mr. Lundy.
Aye.
Mr. Kayla?
Aye.
Authorize the issuance of 1.3 million taxable sanitary sewer system improvement notes to pay cost of construction facilities in the Amherst portion of the county sewer system, to pay cost of fine issued by Ohio EPA related improvements to the county sewer system, and attendant legal cost, and pay cost of issuance of bond anticipation notes.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
Mr. Cortez?
I just want to point out that we don't have any fines. Those were fines that were levied on the county, actually prior, I think, to any of the
It was
two
prior to
commissioners
that.
being here, that we spent a considerable period of the 2000s upgrading the plants and trying to come into compliance with things that had occurred many, many years ago. The county was under $1.5 million, $1.6 million in potential fines. We were able to work on the plants, bring those fines down to $250,000, but the EPA wouldn't release any further. That was rolled into an issuance. This is a reissuance of that bond. So I don't want anybody to look at this and go, oh, we're getting all these fines. This is old. It's under the,
Refinance.
it's a refinance, but we have to still name what the finance is for.
Ms. Kowski?
Aye.
Mr. Lundy.
Aye.
Mr. Kayla?
Aye.
Approve Amendment 0003 to lease agreement with U.S. Department of Agriculture, Lorain County FSA office for office space located at 41110 Russia Road, Elyria. Said lease will be extended until July 31st, 2015, and an annual rental of $15,766.08.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
Did you have something you want to comment?
No, I mean, the lease, actually, the lease has been expired for a while. It's just a housekeeping resolution. We provide certain services, and they provide some of the rent. So I'm happy with how this has ended.
Okay.
Well, it's just a short term, being just 6 months through July 31st, 2015.
Well, I can
So
tell
I'm
you
assuming
why. I'd
we're
like to know. We're waiting on the cost data from
Maximus?
Maximus to come
Okay.
in, so I get a
That was
better picture of and a clearer line of sight to what we really should be charging per the square footage. Maximus hasn't really looked at that facility before. We've just kind of agreed to a price, but we need to firm that up with some data that makes a little bit more sense.
Maximus also looking into the dog kennel issue and other things right now.
Dog kennel
Well,
issue.
just the operations. Yes? Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about for fees and
Yes.
services, so that in case you want to raise those fees?
Right.
Yes, they do that. They do that each time.
Okay.
Ms. Kowski?
Aye.
Mr. Lundy.
Aye.
Mr. Kayla?
Aye.
Selecting Clark and Post Architects, Inc. as the firm determined to be most qualified to perform architectural and engineering services for the renovations to 374 Broad Street, Elyria. Authorize administrator to request a fee proposal and enter into contract negotiations in accordance with the Ohio Revised Code 153.69.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
Any comments about that, Mr. Cortez? We're moving
No,
forward.
No, this was I received my instructions from the board, and there it is.
Okay.
So we haven't completely negotiated the cost, but we have done the RFQ, we've gone through the process, and my instructions was to have this on the agenda, and it's there.
But were there other applicants besides Clark and Post?
There was a few.
Okay.
I was not on the review team.
Okay.
There was a team put together of some of your staffers, and they ranked the proposals and made the recommendations. So I didn't participate in that.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Ms. Kowski?
Aye.
Mr. Lundy.
Aye.
Mr. Kayla?
Aye.
Under Community Development, the Create the Fund 3416 LCCW Assessment Grant for the Brownfield.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Ms. Kowski?
Did you want to comment about that? No? Okay. Aye.
Mr. Lundy.
Aye.
Mr. Kayla?
Aye.
Under CBCF, advertise for the food service bids for CBCF. Notice to be in the Chronicle on February 13th and 20th, and open at 2 p.m. on March 3rd in Meeting Room D. Mandatory pre-bid is February 25th at 10 a.m. at CBCF.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Ms. Kowski?
Aye.
Mr. Lundy.
Aye.
Mr. Kayla?
Aye.
Mr. Cortez?
I have no additional comments this morning. Thank you.
Mr. Ennis?
Commissioners, I have one matter of imminent litigation that I would like to discuss with you in executive session.
Commissioners report.
You might have read about, it's called Carly's Cause. It's a young girl who, instead of getting birthday presents, she asked people to donate food and supplies for the dogs, different rescues. Well, she's, last couple of years, given to the kennel. This year, says, I got a email from Kelly Smick, says Carly's Cause is done for another year. I can't believe how the community came through once again. There is a ton of supplies. Yes, 1 ton. There are almost 900 pounds of dog food and treats. Says I don't have the totals, but they will be dropping them off at the kennel. Carly's Cause total dog food up to 1,000 pounds, and that was her goal. She also collected $1,400 in cash and checks and donations towards the Spay and Neuter Fund. So she's going to be delivering these things on Friday. I just want to tell her what a great job she does, and for all the people that donated. My niece actually wants to start a collection drive for blankets and things for dogs too. There's so many people with such big hearts out there, so I just wanted to thank them for doing that for us, and we need more people in the world like that. So, end of my report.
Busy week. Congratulations, Lorain County Blue, Chris Barton, and all the volunteers. Their chili cook-off was sold out. 1,300 people at the college the other night. Another great job raising money for men in blue who have problems and or their families. But they did a great job once again. Attended the Transportation Summit that Commissioner Lundy hosted, a full house there. I was in Washington, D.C. for 3 days attending National Association of Regional Councils, which NOACA is a member of. Just great presentations. They covered everything going on in D.C. Actually, the opening speaker, Bruce Katz, who's Vice President, Director of Metropolitan Policy Program for the Brookings Institution, 200 of us in a room. He said, I'd like to welcome you all to Washington, D.C., the place where great ideas come to die. A lot of discussions on the partisanship down there and not being able to get anything accomplished. He said it's been very difficult, even the small items. But talking about how we're trying to fix our broken economy, get everybody going, because the economy is picking up. We heard from former Transportation Secretary Ray LaHood, who was a 9-term member of Congress, Republican out of Illinois, who was appointed by President Obama to run transportation, about the need to increase the gas tax in our nation with failing infrastructure and building. But again, he said it's so polarized down there. Everybody knows they need it, but to come across, they probably won't get anything done. And we're hoping for a new transportation bill, but they're probably looking at being a continuing resolution with 3-year-old funding to it. Older Americans Act, discussions in regards to community programs for seniors and transportation being one of those issues. We did have a really nice afternoon. They put together a roundtable session. They called it speed dating, where they brought in all the federal agencies and 3 or 4 people at a table, and they had 16 agencies there. The first one I went to sit down at was the Department of Energy, thinking that had something to do with our Federal Energy and Regulatory Commission, some questions in regards to the Nexus pipeline. that wasn't part of their, that was another different department that wasn't there. But a lot of energy issues. I'll be handing this off to Mike Challenger, just resources for state and local governments, funding for traffic lights where Lorain County missed out in the last round of grants to have their lights upgraded. Most communities did in Northeast Ohio, so maybe that'll help. Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. Jim, you would have really enjoyed that. Portia Wu, who is the Assistant Secretary of Employment Training, talked about all the new changes coming up and tying in with education now, where they're making it a mandate to work with education, where in the past they worked two separate paths.
Well, it's going to be very challenging. Also, Governor Kasich has some initiatives that we'll be seeing pretty soon that are going to tie benefits to Job and Family Services to a continuation that includes a job element component and hopefully leads to sustainability. And counties are going to be measured on those things, and money is going to be moved around based upon the statistical data that has gotten from how successful we are. It could be an exciting time, or it can be a really, really difficult time coming up for Lorain County and other counties to try to meet these new requirements. I think some of it's going to be unveiled in Cincinnati here shortly. I'm going to be watching that very closely. Mary Lou Golsky's been watching it very closely, as well as Mike Longo, to see how all these pieces fit together and what we need to do going forward. And there's going to be some requirements from the county commissioners with regard to designations. So I will keep you informed of that. And I think some of this is also in response to what the federal government's doing and what Kasich hopes to achieve.
Well, that's what the discussion was. The feds put their rules, and then the states get to mold what best fits. But they actually, every time they spoke, whoever was speaking, they kept referring to what Texas has done. I guess their state of the state when it comes to handling workforce dollars and how they're putting their projects together. And a couple of commissioners from Texas spoke.
Well, let me state this, Commissioner. Up until just recently, Texas was a bang state for jobs, job creation. They're not doing so well right now. So I don't. The model takes people from assistance to sustainability. You can't take them from assistance to sustainability if there's no jobs.
Correct. Yeah,
So-
that was discussion points. They talked about all the training and tying into education. They actually have a career they can go into that's needed.
Again, you can educate with extreme prejudice, but if there's no job at the end of the road, and job creation still has been extremely challenging in the state of Ohio, and those jobs are being measured, by the handfuls, not by the bushel. And Texas model worked very, very well because they were creating jobs at an enormous pace where they were importing workers. We've been exporting workers. So I really don't like a glove that fits one place to be
they just kept
squeezed on
pointing out where
someplace
they had done
else.
some creative things that seemed to have worked under their roles, and it was
I understand.
end of my report.
I was going to say, it's hard to compare things to Texas. That's
Yeah.
a state that, but I understand what you're talking about with their model. I mean, just the severance tax on gas and oil alone, they bring in over $4 billion. And here in the state of Ohio, we bring in $2 million.
It was
on gas
interesting,
and oil.
actually. They had ended that sitting around with a gentleman from these different states, talking to the group from Detroit, which is having a very difficult time in the rebuilding in their regional area, and they don't have any local sales tax. They have 6% for the state. The state's trying to raise it to 7% and put the 1% towards just transportation. And there's not many communities that have a local income tax up there, and the ones that do have a very hard time collecting to the residents who live in the city but work outside, because the outside employers don't necessarily have to report the local income tax. It was just neat to see how everybody else does their taxing issues. Chicago's 10.5% sales tax. So it's just how everybody does their funding.
Well, we always hear, run government like a business, but part of business is you need revenue to cover your costs. So just wanted to first welcome you back. I was surprised you didn't stay in the Lincoln bedroom when you were in Washington.
No. I didn't make it to the White House.
Work that out next time. Also wanted to congratulate Lorain County Blue. Amazing turnout over there. I think they were saying maybe, 1,300, I believe was the number.
sold out,
And Chris Barton, Pete Soto, everyone who worked on that, just a huge, huge success. I don't know where they could possibly ever hold that event.
Chris and I were
It seems
kidding
like
about
they're
that.
outgrowing Lorain County Community College already. So, but congratulations to them on that. Also wanted to thank everyone who came out for the Transportation Summit. As we know, boy, the weather was just awful that day. And we kept thinking maybe 25 or 30 people would show up because the weather was so bad. We were anticipating more than that, but the reality is we actually had 100 individuals who came out that evening. And I want to thank my colleagues for helping to make it possible. The commissioners were one of the sponsors involved with that event, along with the Public Service Institute, LCC, hosting the facilities, hosting the event, providing the facilities, and then the League of Women Voters. Can't say enough good things about them. Barb Barton, Sharon Pearson, and a lot of Oberlin transportation advocates. I've always said that if we could just harness the energy that comes out of Oberlin, we wouldn't need any energy facilities. Just a lot of passion and energy. It always comes out of that community. So, also wanted to make everybody aware that our next Transportation Summit will be held in this building and in this room, March 5th from 6 until 8 p.m. So we would encourage you to attend, and also wanted to thank members of the media for their excellent coverage, I thought, of the event leading up to it, telling a lot of the people stories that need to be told. I think we've opened a lot of eyes in the county of people who are not aware that 13% of our residents cannot get to work because they don't have a car. So it was also interesting to see the follow-up story by Lisa Roberson on Sunday, where Karina Williams received an amazing surprise from a very generous woman out of Wellington. You know, I can say to the woman in Wellington who's anonymous is that you are a saint in my book, making possible the purchase of a 2003 Dodge Neon for Karina Williams to use to actually be able to get to work. Unfortunately, Karina Williams is just one story. There's lots of other people still not able to get to work. I wish we could buy a car for everyone so they could get there. But so this is part of the ongoing discussion. We hope you'll join us for that on March 5th from 6 until 8 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you.
Board correspondence?
I move the reading be waived.
Second.
Discussion. Ms. Kowski?
Aye.
Mr. Lundy.
Aye.
Mr. Kalo?
Aye.
Public comment?
Lisa, did you want to introduce your?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'd like to introduce Casey Saunders. He's our new purchasing coordinator, started Monday. Been keeping him very, very busy. He's learning quite a bit, and I think we're going to be able to depend on him for a lot of things. He's definitely a go-getter.
Good.
Welcome
Good.
to
It
the
was
team.
nice to
Say a
meet
couple
you
words.
yesterday. You didn't? No. Good to meet you.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, Casey
Look forward
lives
to
in,
meeting with you.
you live in Avon Lake, correct?
I do. That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yep. So
That's
I'm
how we
Recruited
convert-
from-
that's how we
recruited
convert
him from-
Avon Lake.
Right. We recruited him from Cuyahoga County. He used to be.
That's correct. Yeah, just this last May. we
Good.
go over. So yeah, I'm excited to meet everybody and work with everybody. So
Welcome aboard.
Yeah,
thanks so
welcome.
much.
Thank you.
Anybody else wishing to address the board? Going to be a while, bringing up a lot of stuff.
No, your agenda indicates I'm limited to 3 minutes, so I'll try to keep it to that.
I
unless
might
have
let you
questions
go a
for
little
me.
longer.
Well, I say that because 3 times in the last 2 months, the courts have requested meetings with the commissioners to discuss the locations for the probation department. I made that personal request to all of you on November 25th at the budget hearing. I followed up with a letter 4 or 5 days later, December 2nd, that was forwarded to your council, requesting an opportunity to meet and discuss those issues because we are confident, and I've never heard a response that would indicate that you disagreed with my position in that regard. But it's our position that whatever happens in the Supreme Court will not assist us in determining where the county probation department should be located in the future. I followed that up with a letter February 2nd or 3rd that was dropped off in all 3 of the mailboxes of our commissioners last week. I asked Mr. Lundy about it on his way in, and he was not familiar with it. I don't know who goes through your mailbox. I know it's not listed on the correspondence. So I'm not certain what you really want to hear from me, so I'll limit it to comments unless you want more. As I promised you folks a month ago, we would have at that time, we were requesting an opportunity for our architect to review the plans, the CAD drawings, to meet with Mr. Coco, and to review the site for the proposed new location. When we were here in that regard, all of those requests had been rebuffed. Ultimately, you changed your position in that regard. And within, I think, about 8 days thereafter, we accomplished all of those. The CAD drawings were provided to us, and I had advised you, I think Ms. Kokoski, I actually personally talked to you on the phone probably about 2 weeks later, indicating that I had concerns about the particular location, but wanted to wait until we got an appropriate response from an expert with regard to whether it was going to be satisfactory. And from our perspective, our goal has been twofold. Our goal was that wherever they're located, it satisfies the needs of that department. And that's the only real issue we ever have with regard to the location of any of our facilities, whether they be the probation department or our own employees, direct employees. The second was, at least voiced by at least two of the commissioners, was a desire to consolidate the probation department wherever they might be located into one building. Generally,
With PSI.
what's that?
With PSI.
Exactly.
Okay.
We are right now in two buildings. You had placed them in the courthouse, I think about 8 to 10 years ago, and the commissioners had positioned, not necessarily all of you, because not all of you were on the board at that time, but you folks had placed the PSI department into the Columbia Gas building when it was created approximately 2 or 3 years ago. So that's been our approach with regard to this, is to honor what is our expectation and what the Supreme Court expects of courts in running their probation department, and what you folks desire as far as minimizing costs. Now, we haven't talked about the additional cost for two buildings. We've only talked, I think, Ms. Kokoski and I have talked only about the security costs, but obviously if you have two buildings, there's additional maintenance costs as a result. There's additional custodial costs in that regard. There's an additional aspects of overhead and staffing that a consolidated department would resolve a number of those issues. Quite honestly, from our perspective, though, the best way to resolve those issues is actually have those people working in the same building that we work in. But be that as it may, we have had an opportunity to review all those drawings, and we can tell you without any question that the proposed location for on Broad Street will not satisfy the court's needs and will not satisfy the commissioner's needs of consolidating the two offices. With regard to the court's needs, there is insufficient space for lobby space. There is insufficient space for the security equipment and the entrance. There is insufficient space for visitors to line up inside the building before proceeding through the screening or security equipment. To give you a comparison in that regard, you'll note in the Justice Center there is a large lobby area before you actually get to the screening equipment. We find in certain times of the day that is particularly needful because of the weather conditions outside and the fact that we may have long lines if jurors are coming in. At the same time, parties are coming in on our criminal days. It's particularly crowded. That would be an issue at the Broad Street location. I don't know that anybody here particularly cares that our defendants will be queuing up outside the building. I would think in light of the Elyria Mayor's and Elyria Police Chief's concern regarding placing the probation department so close to the economic development center of the city of Elyria, that they may be concerned with the queuing of felons on Broad Street. There's insufficient space identified for grants or the record storage. There is no holding cell to secure arrested criminals, and as you know from the Supreme Court report provided to you folks months ago, the Supreme Court urged us to get a holding cell created where our two probation department offices are presently located. There is no office space or work areas for two lab technicians. These are the individuals who test defendants' urine to determine whether they are in violation of their community control sentence. There is no lab testing restrooms. They are necessarily going into restrooms. We have two employees, one male, one female, who test defendants to determine whether they are using drugs. They require a separate bathroom in that regard in order to ensure security and proper oversight of the process. There's insufficient space for the two largest training rooms. There is no third conference room. There is insufficient space for the employee break room. In fact, the employee break room is, I think, smaller than the ones that we have for the 6 employees in my courts. And you're suggesting, or your architect is suggesting, that that should be sufficient for 30-some employees in the probation department. You are, in fact, by utilizing this location, moving our probation department 1 block further away from the Justice Center. The vast majority of their work is done, obviously, in the offices, but the second place they do their most work is in the courthouse. And there's nothing contained in the plans that indicate that there was security equipment throughout the building. So not only did you not include, or your architect did not include, the security equipment at the entrance, but there is security equipment throughout the building. If you go over to the Justice Center, you'll see cameras at various locations. No such apparatus is identified in the drawings. Now, maybe it was missed, although certainly I don't think we could have missed the screening devices at the front entrance because those are fairly sizable. And since you suggested at the time, that, or at least the information that provided to us indicated that the cost of this building was going to be somewhere around $1.2 million, I would suggest that that's probably an underestimation, merely from the standpoint that you don't have anything in there regarding security equipment and don't have anything in there regarding the other additional security equipment throughout the building. I don't know what the numbers would mean, but obviously if you try to modify the building to satisfy our needs, not even from the standpoint of the numbers of employees, but merely the needs that our probation department has in supervising felons, I think that obviously that would have a significant impact on the building costs with regard to this matter. I think my 3 minutes is up. Do you folks have any questions of me?
My question just on the entry part of it, Judge. I don't see the probation department, having watched what goes outside of the courthouse, the volume of people that enter the Justice Center necessarily, when you're saying enough access, or how you schedule if you're concerned that there's going to be too much at one time. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Well,
you know what I'm saying? The volume, because you've got the DR in there, you've got the Court of Common Pleas, the probate, the prosecutor's office, clerk of court. There's a lot more volume. That's why it has that larger foyer area versus the amount of volume that would be the probationers that you guys have said can be out on community control or whatever.
Yeah, I think the information that we provided you in January indicated that each of our probation officers, I think we have 12 probation officers who supervise individuals, have a caseload of 90. 90 times 12 works out to be about 108. No, excuse me,
1,080, yes.
1,080 defendants
Total probation,
who see
that's
our
right.
probation officers. Now, do they see them every week? It depends. If they're on low, moderate, or high. That's not including the individuals who go over to the PSI departments. Those are added. All I can tell you is, if you recall, Commissioner Kalo, when the Sheriff's Committee was looking at the security issues with regard to these 2 buildings, he indicated to you that if in fact you moved them into the 5th floor, he would have to add security to the 1st floor of that building. Both of the plans that have been submitted to you folks, first the plan for the 5th floor in 2013, it's approximately 2 years you've had that plan. And then again, the plan we provided you regarding the courthouse, and I believe that was given to you sometime in October of last year. Both of those indicated a need for approximately lobby space for 100 people. Now, I appreciate that we may not schedule 100 people at any given time, but the fact of the matter is our defendants come in with family members. They get driven by acquaintances or friends. They have children with them. And so our probation department has advised us and the architects that we need sufficient lobby space for that kind of numbers. And so the real difficulty is with regard to the line is that since you've given no space set aside for the security facilities at all, and a minimal space, an insufficient space for the lobbying of the individuals who are coming in, we would anticipate that security device has to be almost adjacent to the very front door. And so that's why we're suggesting that it's either going to be a gathering of a number of people in a vestibule or queuing outside. So the fact of the matter is that I'm kind of chagrined that we're going through this process because number one, we send correspondence and give each of you a letter requesting to have a meeting. We didn't necessarily request it at this commissioner's hearing, this meeting. We've requested since November an opportunity to sit down with you folks and talk about these issues, and no response to our November request, no response to our December request, and obviously no response to our letter from last week. And you folks are deciding who the architect's going to be. Mr. Lundy said at the January meeting that the thing that worked really well for the Elyria City Courthouse was the work and the cooperation of the various departments, meeting with Judge Lockgrays, and I don't know if Judge Bennett was there or not, but probably Judge Bennett, to go over what their needs were. And so we had the impression, based upon the fact that you were allowing us to have our analysis done, and you had, at least one of you had suggested that it was important to have a cooperative process in this regard, that we thought you'd follow through. And so what do we see on the agenda? Nothing about our correspondence, nothing about our response, even though you folks were told when I was here in January that as soon as we got this response back, we were going to advise you. I told you that personally over the phone, Ms. Kokoski. And you have a review team regarding the architect, and nobody from the court system is identified in that regard. I have no information that anybody from the probation department or the court system was even contacted for input in that regard. You now know, essentially 15 minutes after you approve this architect, that architect's plans that were submitted to you folks are insufficient for the space needs for both of those departments. And so all I can tell you is, since I asked for a meeting in November, you folks, the taxpayers, have incurred about over $60,000 in legal expenses. Since December 2nd, when I sent a letter requesting a staying of the proceedings in the Supreme Court and a meeting to discuss these issues, it's not much different. At the very least, we know our billings are somewhere around $40,000 since that time. I would assume that even if yours is only half that much, that means the taxpayer money is being spent on litigation that is not necessary and will not answer these issues. And really the biggest issue I've got is, maybe not the biggest issue because there's so many right now pounding my brain. You folks have known almost since day one that our two probation departments would not fit into that building. Mr. Cordez advised us on January 7th that we would not fit in that building.
Which building, the Broad Street building?
That's correct. And interestingly, at the last time we were together, when we were talking about the architectural review, you had suggested, Ms. Kokoski, that the building space was about the same. And Mr. Cordez at that time corrected you. And I don't think he specified any numbers, but he clearly indicated that the space in the Broad Street building was not the same amount of space set aside in the courthouse for the expansion and inclusion of both departments in one building. It was not the same amount of square footage that was available on the 5th floor of the Justice Center in that regard. And so if you want to continue to run two separate operations and incur those additional expenses, I would suggest to you that Broad Street would work for that. But by doing so, you're actually moving our probation department a block further away. And so the questions I have are, first of all, what, if anything, was told to the architect about what the probation department's needs were?
Do you want to respond to that?
Well, first I'd like to make it clear I didn't say they wouldn't fit. What I
You
said
did,
was,
sir.
what I said was the footprint wasn't the same size as what was in the Justice Center.
Sir, your actual words are, it's not going to fit.
With the same, you took an excerpt of something. What the whole conversation was.
A portion of your conversation with Mr.
Well, certainly, if I
Lubbe.
took a portion of your conversation and snapped out a piece that fit my needs, it may sound differently too.
feel free.
I do feel free, because I
No,
think
I know, go ahead.
what I'm telling you is that I said it wouldn't fit under the square footage that you were asking for at the time. And I do agree with the rest of your comments that I did say the square footage was different. It was smaller. And if they had to have the same square footage they were asking for at the Justice Center, it wouldn't fit.
I know there was a discussion
But I didn't
on
say the
making a smaller
department couldn't
office.
fit, because that's all relative about how much space they need. And that is really what the argument is. Whether the space you're asking for is more space than is actually needed. That's the difference that's going on with you guys right now. True enough?
And I think that's why I asked you, what information did you provide to your architect with regard to our needs?
What I provided to the architect was the renderings that were given to us from the 5th floor of the Justice Center, and asked them to see if it could work in that building over there. That's all I really had to go on. And then the board looked at a few renderings, and they asked for some changes on some of the training rooms and the size of the offices and things, and they made it what they thought would fit to be a suitable location in that building. I really had no other input other than that.
With all due respect, sir, since we gave you those plans 2 years ago, and there's never been any question raised about whether those plans are exorbitant or unnecessary, it seems to me that not having something is different than not asking for it. Not having something would be, folks, how do you come up with this plan 2 years ago that shows us using 11,000 square feet or whatever the square footage is? What are your needs in that regard, so that we can do an adequate analysis of whether we're requesting something more than our needs or something appropriate with our needs? That's been in your hands for 2 years.
Well, the board has...
I'm not done with responding to your question in that regard, sir, because you asked me, how could you go about establishing or getting this information? The second way is we provided you a similar plan with regard to the courthouse in October of last year. Although there's been quotes by Mr. Cortez and Mr. Kalo with regard to that plan in the newspaper, none of them really spoke to the issue of our needs. It spoke to a question of whether they had to be sealed, and there was a question about whether there was going to be a need for a new air conditioning or new heating devices for the building. Nothing about our needs. So we've given you 2 different plans in a stretch of 2 years, and never have you asked us what our needs are. And understand, nobody here in the court has ever said, don't call our probation department and find out what our needs are. You folks were the ones who tried to stop us from getting information. We have never tried to stop you folks from getting information. We're the only ones who went out and did the testing with regard to the courthouse. You folks said, well, give us your reports. We give you the reports. Is there any response? No. It's...
You know, Judge, you say you did this, you did this, you did this. Actually, lots of the work you did was so you didn't have to be there, okay? And I didn't ask you, how do I go about getting the data? I didn't even say that here. What I said was what I used. I didn't ask you how to go about getting the data. Okay, the drawings that were sent over, my instructions from the board were to give them to the architect and see if they could make them work. That's what I did. That's all I did. And as far as...
I don't doubt that at all, sir.
Excuse me?
I don't doubt that at all.
As far
I'm not being
as...
critical of that. I'm being critical of what you failed to do in that regard.
What did I fail to do in that regard?
Because twice you've gotten information indicating how much space we believe we need. I would expect an analysis as to, before you say, fit this size 10 foot into an 8 shoe, you'd say, do they need an 8 foot, a size 8, or they need a size 10?
So we came back and we said to you, would this work? Which I think sending you the drawings, like we did send you drawings. We haven't heard from you until now that they don't work. All right, we sent them over.
That's why
to you.
we went forward.
I disagree, sir. First of all, I advised Ms. Kokoski about 3 weeks ago that I believe that they didn't work, but I wanted an expert opinion from an architect in that regard. That was a personal conversation I had with her on a Saturday. And the fact of the matter is that you folks rebuffed us from trying to establish whether it did or did not satisfy our needs. until we forced the issue at a commissioners meeting a month ago.
Well, let me take you back to when Judge Burge stood here a year ago and threw a tantrum in front of everybody when we talked about that building, and the architect said we're comparing apples to rocks when we tried to have that conversation. You know, there's a lot more going on here than what you're actually stating. Now, you may have been late to this issue as the administrative judge, but Judge Burge was here. We did have these conversations, sir, and we did try to go over those things. So, you know,
Are you sure because you were unhappy with his response, does that really mean that you tried to have a conversation with regard to that? And I will tell you that I told you folks from day one when I took over that office, whatever your issues were with Judge Burge, they were not going to be confronted by me and from me.
And I understand that,
I
Judge.
know all of you three too personally well to even try to take an approach like that.
And you did say that, sir, but there was other work that was done with Judge Burge that can't be dismissed. We had meetings here in this room. We did talk about that building. We did try to talk about spacing it so that it would work. We had those conversations. They did take place. You're saying they didn't.
If I recall, if that was an issue in Judge Burge's time, that would have been an issue with regard to the courthouse, not necessarily the Broad Street building or the Justice Center. And if it was including Broad Street building, remember, the commissioners decided in March of last year not to use the Broad Street building for this purpose. Whether it was based upon your knowledge of our needs, because it sounds like that couldn't have been the case, or personal desires in your regard, I don't know. All I can tell you is you folks are now jumping way ahead. You're now picking the architect to modify a building. You announced to the Community Corrections Board last week that you're moving the Probation Department there, and you don't have a clue how or whether it does in fact satisfy our Probation Department's needs. Mr. Lundy, you told us a month ago the way it worked at the courthouse was we worked together. Is there anything about this process that you see that suggests to you that that's the avenue the commissioners are taking in this regard?
Well, let me just, first off, we're not in a courtroom, so I'm not going to be cross-examined. But I don't like the tone of the conversation.
I think we're kind of,
yeah, I don't like the tone of the conversation
here
today. You know, I guess I'm used to operating differently. I'm used to comments coming through the chair and not, direct conversations between two individuals. And I really wish we'd observe those roles, but we don't in this room, apparently. But, the concern here, Judge, is that, it's a legal matter, and that's what makes it so difficult to have the conversations. And I've said it over and over again, if you're willing to suspend your legal action and we would suspend on our end, we could all get in the room and talk it through. I think the taxpayers look at this and even watching this show, and they're probably saying, wow, these folks are actually arguing about the size of a lobby and, whether a restroom's here, restrooms there. And I'm not saying anything negative in the way of the work conditions. The work conditions need to improve for the workers. We need to have something that works for them. But the general public, they don't even see the bills that we see all the time. And heck, we're even paying for your architect for that matter. So, it's ridiculous. This shouldn't be going on. I just don't understand why, you and I have always got along very well. I don't understand why all of us just can't sit down, leave the attorneys outside the room, stop the meter from running, which is draining big-time funds, and have conversations about this and get this resolved. This shouldn't have to be a legal matter.
Sir, I agree completely. That's why I asked for that from the commissioners back in November of 2014, November 25th at the budget hearing. I followed that up with correspondence. In that correspondence, I suggest that all judges will attend. I don't suggest, I tell you, all judges will attend. I tell you, we stay the proceedings so that you folks don't have to pay for our filing of evidence and your filing of evidence and our filings of briefs and your filings of briefs. I can give you another copy of it. But that's also why I sent you the letter on February 3rd. And once again, we requested an opportunity to sit down. And so I don't know what I can do.
About that February 3rd letter, I don't recall ever getting a letter on February 3rd to sit down, and we did discuss, since we had not heard, we gave you the opportunity to take your architects through the building, hadn't heard anything back, figured things were okay. So that's why we started to move forward. And the litigation does not have anything to do with where the location of the Probation Department.
Ms.
Thank you.
Ward, who delivered that, indicated that she had left one of those in each of your mailboxes. If there's an issue about that, and
It did not receive this.
All I can tell you is Ms. Ward told us that she put them in your 3 mailboxes. Whether you received them or not, I can't answer that, or why you didn't receive them under those circumstances, I can't answer that. But the fact of the matter is, if we're gonna talk about my letter of February 3rd, then I suppose we can forget my personal request to all of you in this room at that podium on November 25th, and we can ignore then the letter I sent to all of you, including a carbon copy to you, Mr. Lundy, on December 2nd or December 3rd of last year. I will tell you, it's the same thing I told you when I was here a month ago. We just want to sit down with you. But for some reason, you say you want to sit down and talk about this, but it just doesn't happen.
Well, we do want to sit down and talk about the Broad, but I don't think you want to talk about the Broad, you want to talk about the Broad Street building as to how it does not work, and you have to go to the 5th floor. You're not giving the Broad Street an opportunity to work. You don't want to work with us to get you there. You want to work with us to get you to the 5th floor.
I told you on November 25th that if you choose a building that satisfies our probation department's needs, we have no choice.
But
We
you're
will
saying
go
it's
there.
not going to work. And that's
Yes.
why you wanted the information, so you could prove that it doesn't work. This room holds what, 50 people, 100 people? Not even 100 people. 28, about 50 people? You need a bigger room than this for a lobby, for a probation department? No way.
I'm
I
not
mean,
suggesting that.
I'm
The
just saying, I
architect-
think
the-
some
the
of the things that
architects-
you're asking for are excessive. The amount of room that you need for a lobby and the size of the offices, we scaled them down just a little bit.
How can you state that opinion without knowing what our needs are?
Well, an office size is an office size. I mean, when somebody occupies an office, whether it's 10 by 12, 10 by 10, 10 by 8.
Wouldn't it differ, though, based upon what's going on in that office?
It could, but different things could be made to work. The office space that used to be in this building when the prosecutors were in here and the adult probation, when they first started, they had some office space over here, and they were 8 by 8 offices up here. I'm just saying it's very subjective, I guess, is what I'm suggesting.
Well, we tried to reduce that subjectiveness by having our probation department tell the architect, prior to those placement of those plans in your hands 2 years ago, we said, this is what our probation officers do in their office. What will they need in order to satisfy that?
And we had an architect that said it could be smaller.
But you've already told me you didn't tell that architect what my people do in their office. So why would you think of that as a reasoned opinion?
Well, well, let me back up on one thing here. As far as the December, you stated that you sent the request to the board. There's some information that's missing there. The board did vis-a-vis council request certain stipulations so that they would sit down and have conversations. And they did talk to your council about that, and we got information, again, via our council, that those conditions were unacceptable, and that's why the board didn't sit down. Whether that's right or wrong, Judge, that's not my position to take. I can only state that the board did look at this, did talk to the lawyers, did ask for certain things, and those things weren't granted. We keep getting the argument that the board does nothing, that they sit here, they do nothing, and they have not done things. They have worked through their council, they have offered things to council, and some of those things have not been accepted by the courts, and that's why the groups haven't met.
And if I can jump in here real quick so we separate the issues, Judge. Our court litigation is about the funding issue in regards to the security.
That's it.
Correct. Our litigation has nothing to do with the location of the probation department. They keep getting blended, and they're not. They're two totally separate issues. So staying in litigation still doesn't do anything in regards to our probation department. We're still talking about the funding issue.
I know, but this thing of the litigation means we don't have a ticker on 2 attorneys, yours and ours, continuing to bill the taxpayers for a dispute that might get resolved through mediation. The letter on December 2nd, actually, there was, I think, 3 conditions with regard to that was placed by Mr. Cahill, your counsel.
Yes, sir.
Back, I would say approximately October of last year. Those conditions were that the court not enforce the 2 orders, Judge Burge's order in August and my order in October. To your knowledge, has any judge, either myself or Judge Burge, attempted to do anything in the way of contempt or other proceedings to enforce those orders?
Whether you have or not, it was a request. Was the request responded to?
Quite honestly,
Was it agreed to that? That's all I'm asking.
have the judges done anything to enforce those orders?
But have you agreed to that stipulation?
Yes.
Well, we never received.
We agreed to that, and then we agreed to have all the judges there, and that's when Mr. Cahill told the Supreme Court that you folks don't want to mediate.
If I can make a suggestion, guys.
Well, let me just finish with the
Go ahead.
Judge, Tim, and
Go ahead.
I'll yield to you, sir. What the board's direction was, and I was in that meeting, was that they didn't want to mediate the litigation and bring in the location as part of that mediation, because the litigation was separate. What the board told Cahill, and I was sitting there, was that they wanted the litigation to be separated, and they weren't going to go mediate where the location was. They would mediate the litigation. And we were told that that was unacceptable, that we had to mediate the litigation and the unhappiness about the location of the adult probation department.
Our dispute current.
I'm just telling you what we were told, Judge.
Our dispute
And I can
currently
tell you,
is-
we were never told that that was the issue from your perspective, nor do I think we have any correspondence in that regard.
Well, let me finish, Judge,
But-
because I was there before you were answering there. It's two separate issues.
Sure.
I have no problem talking about probation issues. We don't talk about litigation. We have legal counsel tied there, and until that gets settled, we can't mix the two, and that keeps being brought in from, I guess, your side of legal counsel on what we're being told to
And
mediate
billed for by your
discuss. You
counsel
don't- You
also.
don't mediate location, because that falls to the commissioners if it meets the needs of the judge. That's the authority of the Board of Commissioners, is locations of departments.
I'll respond to your statement. and
Okay,
it's
that's
just- I
fine.
want to respond to yours, Mr. Kokoski. Remember, you folks sued us. We talked about a month or so ago, and you said, well, you're the reason we have this litigation. And I said to you, you folks sued us. And you had a quizzical comment in that regard. I can't remember it specifically, but for some reason, maybe that's been lost in the process. You folks sued us. You're the ones who required us to get legal counsel to defend that case. I can tell you, we've incurred approximately $170,000 in billings since you sued us.
Actually, no, the discussion, Judge, if I remember when you hired Mr. Chandra, was way predating us hiring any legal counsel.
I know, so I asked-
Your Chandra hiring was more in regards to the location and condition of the county courthouse. It was not in regards, you didn't hire Mr. Chandra in regards to the funding issue that we were having.
I understand that.
Okay, they're two separate issues. Again, Chandra was hired in regards to
You're
overseeing
correct,
the
Commissioner.
courthouse. That is the issue with Mr.
Absolutely,
Chandra.
and I can make a
before
suggestion that kind
well
of cuts through
before.
all this. I believe that the judges will be amenable, two separate issues, I think, security, litigation, courthouse, location. I believe the judges would be amenable to mediating that issue separately on whatever conditions you want today. I believe we can get the answer to you today for that. We can continue that. There's probably not going to be a lot more cost in that respect, but it could. There could be oral arguments, whatever. If you are desirous of mediating that issue on whatever conditions, if you
What
guys...
issue was that, Tim?
The
Funding.
the
the
security
sheriff?
issue.
The
The issue that we're currently
Well,
in front of.
we're not actually mediating the security issue. We haven't disagreed with the security
Okay.
issue. We disagree with the funding
Funding
order.
mechanism.
Okay.
Because we don't believe, and I have said personally
Okay.
as this county commissioner, that I think this is something should be decided at the highest court.
Okay.
To decide work. That is my personal opinion. I'm not, and that's never
Sure.
happened. We haven't gotten there because the board hasn't agreed to that. That's been Ted, but I'm very involved in the state legislative
Okay.
process for county commissioners.
Okay.
This has been brought up amongst other commissioners in the state of what's happening and how it's being handled. So I think is this one of those decisions that really needs to be, the High Court's got to decide.
I
on
only
what
offer
happened
the
here.
thing, if you're desirous of mediating on whatever terms you want regarding the issue that is currently in front of the Supreme Court, tell us. That's it. So the secondary issue, which I think is the bigger issue, and I know the judges asked, and I think we can continue to debate all the issues that are associated with it. I would submit to you the better course is to have, if you guys are amenable, agree on a date today where we sit down. Commissioner, you will then find out in detail, once we sit down and talk, why the court believes as it does and to the space. And quite frankly, I think then through that meeting, you will get an opportunity to challenge us, because it is your right to say, as the funding authority, court, what you've suggested is unreasonable. And if you can demonstrate that to us, then we'll go in a different direction. But quite frankly, if you can't, then I would hopefully you would appreciate and expect that our needs would follow our requests. But we can keep talking around this, or we can all agree to sit down at a date you guys choose and talk. That's all we're asking today. And we can go into anything you want. Is that something that we can agree to do?
One last issue is, I misspoke. It wasn't 170,000. It was approximately 120,000 we've incurred since you folks sued us. But I think that's really all the position we've ever wanted. Sit down and talk, because there's a myriad of issues, and it may be security, it may be how you fund that security. If you recall, Sheriff Stamidi was the one who first solicited you folks for a response to the concerns he had about the security issues for his budget. And much like our letter of February 3rd and my request of November 25th and December 2nd, you folks did nothing about it. So he eventually came to us and said, what am I going to do? I can't afford it, but you guys are going to order me to put it there.
Judge, again, the positioning of the facts, I think that
And that's part of the
they're
litigation that we
disputable.
should not be talking about
Captain
here.
Jasdowski is here. If I misspoke, you can tell me. Mr.
He
Jasdowski, did
come
I
up-
speak about the process?
We had conversation with the Sheriff Stamedi, okay? Now, and this is the basis of the litigation that's being put out here. He has a certain responsibility, and he gets a certain amount of money to carry out that responsibility, okay? And so the board already allocated him his annual appropriation, and if he has to provide for the courthouse security, then he has to provide for it under that allocation. If the board
The
decides...
difficulty in that regard, sir, is that would make sense maybe in March, but when we're making a request in October, I think it's disingenuous to suggest that the sheriff can somehow find $140,000 in his budget
But that's
in the last 2 months of the year.
sheriff's problem, not the court's problem.
No, the sheriff tried
But
to
you
make
made
that...
it your problem.
The sheriff decided to make that your problem. You guys are the ones who refused to accept that as at least an issue to discuss.
They didn't refuse to accept it. The courts came...
Was it put on the
and-
agenda? Did he come before you at a commissioner's meeting?
The courts made it their business by stepping in and ordering us to give money for security.
More
And-
than 3 weeks after the sheriff requested you folks consider his request for additional funding.
And the board considered it and didn't act upon it. And so you decided that you were going to act for them.
No, no, sir. We never said we wanted to act for the commissioners.
No,
we
for the
wanted to act
sheriff.
for our employees. I have the Supreme Court telling me that my employees are in a dangerous situation. You have that report. There was no equivocation with regard to that. That report said our employees are at risk.
Well, that was another
And we
big-
haven't implemented all the security requests simply because of a budgetary issue. But
Well,
there's a number
it would have been good if we didn't have to spend thousands of dollars to get to take a look at it.
If I can suggest
That's
again,
not a true statement, Judge?
We weren't allowed
No,
to see the
because you're
report.
the ones who filed the suit.
We
Mr.
filed the suit
Cortez.
because you put an order against the board that was an improper order.
Correct.
You know,
I did not, Mr. Judge Berger. but
Bobby, I
either way,
apologize.
No, that's okay. I followed it up.
I just take it that the
I
court is
understand.
a
Don't worry, don't
generalization.
worry, don't worry.
But
We're all
there's a
set.
lot of details missing that makes that misrepresents what this board has done. Okay,
well,
a lot
can
of
we meet
details.
and talk about them?
Judge, no, excuse me,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Lubbe. Judge, you can say what we didn't do, we're aware of. You brought the litigation on, you did the funding issue. That's our argument in the court. Okay?
And-
That's our argument in the court. One singular subject. Location of the facility is our other subject. Now, I don't feel, I'm not going to participate in any more conversation in regards to litigation because I believe it should be held at our highest court. The Supreme Court should decide funding issues. Is it the commissioners or does it become the judges?
But the difficulty is that the road you are on now guarantees another round of litigation with regard to the issue of where and whether the facilities that you are requiring of us satisfy our needs.
No, I'm not saying, we didn't get to that subject yet. I'm trying to close our discussion on the litigation that we currently have. That's what I'm addressing. I'm fine with that going through. Now, we have a discussion that we have to have here in regards to a building and the needs of the probation department. That's our discussion point currently, correct? We don't
That's
have a
what you wanna meet
litigation
about.
discussion, we
Yes.
have a discussion about a probation department.
Yes,
Okay. Thank you.
as I requested in November and December and last week.
But the issues were being crossed across to drop, your offer of dropping the litigation or staying litigation in regards to talking about a probation department is not pertinent to each other. They're two totally separate issues.
And we can take that off the table. Let's
Okay.
take the litigation issue off
is
the table.
Litigation in regards to how the funding was done.
I just thought that it would be beneficial to the taxpayers not to be paying for our dispute when we can resolve it at a table.
No, the court already did the funding. We didn't think it was proper. Somebody's got to decide if that was proper or not. Just because you dropped the subject doesn't mean what you did was right or wrong.
No, I agree with you there, but understand that clearly under the law, you did not have to pursue a writ of prohibition. You could have merely waited to see if the court was going to enforce its order, And then if the court decided to enforce its order and hold you folks in contempt, you could have argued that we didn't have the authority to issue what we ordered. You could have had that hearing, but instead you precipitously filed a lawsuit against us.
You really wanted the commissioners to stand in front of the judge that made the order and then make an argument of contempt to a court argument that what they did was right? Oh, my goodness.
Sir, I will tell you that is done regularly in the courts in the state of Ohio. It's not unique to Judge Burge, and it's not unique to Lorain County.
Well, if you were
Every
here-
time a judge's order is disobeyed, the judge has the opportunity to have a hearing regarding contempt. The judge would have an evidentiary hearing in that regard. You'd be able to produce the evidence as to why you couldn't have satisfied the funding order, and then the judge would have had to decide if you were in contempt. And if the judge decided that, you would have then been able to take it to the Court of Appeals.
But but it also provides for a secondary way of doing it that we believe that was more fair, which was a writ of prohibition. It provides for that. It does it not?
If I can interject just please one more time. Certainly the two parties disagree about the litigation, and we can just leave that as it is, okay? Because we're not going to resolve that today. So I would again suggest let's just put a pin in that one, and it's going to go its own course. Can we today agree, forget the litigation, the security issue, the funding order there, can we agree today to come up with a date where all the interested parties will sit down and meaningfully and logically discuss what our needs are and whether or not you feel those needs are reasonable and how we best come to a conclusion?
Are you really going to keep an open mind
Absolutely,
for the Broad
Commissioner.
Street building, though?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, just as an observer in the short time I've been here, I just don't believe in your heart of hearts that you really want any place other than the Justice Center.
Commissioner,
just from what I've observed, and I know everybody's talking about the separate issues and the funding for the security and everything else, but when I start seeing legal bills where there's a architect fee now that's in with your legal bill, that to me says that now we've crossed that line. We've crossed over.
Let's put
And
that
that's
all
why
aside.
I believe is a legal matter. I'd love to resolve everything without having to pay Mr. Chandra another penny.
Okay.
The taxpayers, I think, deserve better from us to work this through without having to pay the legal bills. But I just wish that I could, and I'm not questioning your character. I'm just saying that based upon everything I've observed, I just find it hard to believe that you have any interest in any place, and I mean any place other than the Justice Center.
Here's what I submit to you will happen. Okay? I make no guarantees. You lose nothing by sitting down with us and talking. I would submit to you that you become aware of what our needs are. Quite frankly, if you are interested in legally challenge us subsequently, that gives you the better course so that you can, with information, challenge us. I would suggest to you without that information, we are unquestionably going down a litigation route where we're going to go to court. We're all going to pay attorneys. We're going to pay architects and experts. If we sit down, let's try that path. Let's come up with a date. Let's sit down and see what comes of that meeting.
And I would only add in response to Mr. Lundy's that I don't believe if that was our sole goal and our only approach, then we would not have done an analysis of what it would take to satisfy our needs in the courthouse. We would have just ignored that and just said, hey, we've got lead problems, we got asbestos problems, we got mold problems, we got toilets problems, we got security problems, get us into the 11th floor. So the fact that we had attempted to try to come up with a resolution with regard to the building that half of that unit or 2/3 of that unit is already located in would indicate otherwise. But the other issue is that if in fact that is our goal, the one thing that we're doing that I don't think any other department in the county government has done, in this county at least, is we're willing to pay for that goal. Now I will tell you that when we sit down, I could give you a laundry list of why that location on the 5th floor is better, irrespective of the size issues. I could give you a number of reasons. But the one I keep on going back to is twofold. Number one, we've told you when Ms. Kokoski and Mr. Williams, you weren't had an opportunity, but when Mr. Williams and Ms. Kokoski were indicating a strong interest in resolving the issue of the location, that's when we made an offer of, it could be either a $2 to $2.5 million. We said, listen, Broad Street's going to cost you $900,000. That was the expected cost at that time. This would have been, I think, August of 2014. We said, cap your problems at $900,000. We will pay for the rest. Mr. Williams was, at the very least, agreeable at that time, and I think he had continued in that process from then on. Ms. Kokoski, I think, was appreciative of the offer, but was concerned about whether it could be guaranteed. But I don't know of any other department or division of county government in Lorain County that's ever offered to pay for the facilities they want the commissioners to put them in. And so I think we put our money, and not taxpayer money, where our mouth was in that regard. And secondarily, with regard to that, is I think had we had, and if we could, have a meeting where we sit down and talk about these issues, I can give you a myriad of other reasons why Broad Street doesn't work from your perspective. Not from our perspective, but from your perspective. But I keep on getting rebuffed, and that's why Mr. Lubbe is trying to get me back on track.
Judge, you know, the one thing with regard to Broad Street, you weren't at the meeting, so you probably don't know. The board did ask, while we were trying to do some analysis, would the courts work with us on Broad Street and participate with some funding? And I think, Tim, your answer was?
No.
No.
Absolutely not.
Correct.
Right.
Okay? So, I mean, that harkens to Mr. Lundy's comment about the sincerity.
Jim, I
Actually, sir-
disagree, and I can answer this specifically.
Okay.
The answer is no, because you certainly can put us in Broad Street. At the end of the day, that is certainly your prerogative. But as the judge told you earlier, we physically won't all fit. And so that is not going to be efficient from our perspective. And so being tasked independently with a fiduciary obligation for the funds that we have, we are not going to waste our funds in that endeavor. So I submit respectfully that those are completely separate with, we can't sit down and have a meaningful discussion as to why or why not Broad Street won't work, or what our needs are or not.
We're not going to fund inefficient government, but that's consistent with your own position, because you said to us.
I agree.
You said to us when Commissioner Williams suggested moving into the 5th floor of this building, you said, no, I need my people around me. That was, I think, the economic development and solid waste are located on the 5th floor. Your response was, I need my people around me. So our position is consistent with yours. You wanted to have close access to your people in your various departments.
When was that said?
I'm not certain.
I don't think that was ever said.
Was that
people all over the county
Yeah.
that he administrated?
You
No,
know,
I understand. And if that's your goal, this Broad Street's a perfect opportunity.
You know, Mr. Williams may have reported things to you, because we knew he had an open pipeline to the courts on stuff. But you know, I would caution that I would not weigh it as heavily.
You would at least recognize, if it wasn't what you said, you would at least recognize that having your various departments that are located on the 5th floor in a building 2 blocks away would decrease the efficiency of your work with that department.
I have departments 20 miles away right now. I have departments 5 miles away.
Once again, Mr. Cortez, you're not answering the question I asked. You would at least agree that having the departments that are presently located on the 5th floor at a location 2 blocks away would create some inefficiencies.
I wouldn't at least agree.
You would
In
or
this
would
day
not?
and age
I'm
of
sorry.
technology, I wouldn't agree.
Oh, okay. All right.
And the question was, I would at least agree. You know, that's a very lawyerly way of making a statement, okay? No, I don't agree. I agree. Well, I would think maybe you would at least agree in this day and age of technology that we can overcome those barriers pretty easily.
Possibly some aspects of them, but part of the problem is that the court system still requires some personal contact with the probation officers. Certainly the probation officers have to have personal contact with their defendants in that regard.
Well, you know,
As I said, if you ever
Judge, it's
agree
strange
to
that we
my
have-
request, I would give you many good reasons why you should take this. I think the bottom line is this, Mr. Kalo, you tell Wendy, I want to build a man cave. And she says, and you say, I want to put it in 2 blocks away. And she says, come on, why don't you just put it in the basement? The basement's unfinished.
That was the wrong conversation,
no,
Judge.
I want it 2 blocks away.
She'd tell me 2 blocks away.
And then she tells you she'll pay for 2/3 of it out of her own money.
But you know, Judge, you know, another thing
You
here.
know, Wendy, that's never going to happen.
Since the conversation,
No, I know.
since the conversation,
But that's what's happening here.
Since the conversations go there, you know, has gone many places. I think it's uniquely interesting that we have to hire expensive people with guns to protect people with guns from the people you say is safe to live next door to us.
The felons.
And I would submit to you, Jim, if you sit down with us, you actually gain the information from, and I'm not an expert.
That's information, but
Sure.
you're releasing these people out into the community to live in our community, live next to us, and you're telling me we have to hire people with guns to protect them, and they got guns.
Yes.
I think that is absurd.
First of all, I'm not telling you that. The Supreme Court is telling all of us.
Well, then
That's
they're
correct.
absurd.
Well,
Sir, that's not just the Ohio Supreme Court, that's a national concern. And the fact of the matter is a probation officer in Franklin County was shot and seriously injured a handful of months ago. He was carrying a weapon, or she was carrying a weapon at that time. The fact of the matter is there's issues about training of our officers versus training of security officers. It seems to me that you then would be comfortable with us not having any security at the front entrance to the Justice Center.
I think that having to protect people from the people that are released into our community as being safe to live next door to us is something that most people would recognize as very, very difficult to swallow.
And I would tell you that maybe what we should do is have a meeting with Sheriff's Committee and Captain Drozdowski, and maybe they can better explain to you so you'll realize how foolhardy that opinion is.
Well, who's protecting the person they live next door to?
Or you're talking about, comparing apples and oranges, issues about the next door neighbor versus issues about a.
No, the
defendant.
felon living next door is what he's talking
What's
about.
that?
The felon living next door to the person
Well,
is who he's trying
the
to.
difference is very stark, which is there's a mandate that we're required to do that. So
I understand, Tim, I do
yeah,
understand
and
the mandate.
Jim, I appreciate the
but I'm just-
perspective, but if you sit down with us, we'll say, here's the law, here's why we're doing what we're doing. We could have perhaps even agreed, yeah, that sucks. I hate that law, but that's different from we have to follow it, and you're blaming us
No,
for it.
I'm not blaming
Yeah,
you.
no, I know
I'm
you're
just
not. No,
making-
you're saying
and I
it
didn't blame
seems
you. I understand
ludicrous.
the
I get it.
Supreme Court
I get it.
comes down with those issues, but truly, the public needs to look at some of the things they're being forced to pay for and go, really?
Well, and I think that helps you guys, quite frankly.
I got to tell you, and I understand where Mr. Lubbe's going with this. He wants to move this into an amicable meeting, and I'm okay with that. But
I think
will
it's
tell you,
amicable right
I serve
now.
on the Supreme Court Security Committee, and the concern we raise on a constant basis is issues about securities within courthouses, even though those courthouses have screening devices, even though those courthouses have armed employees providing the protection. They talk about it at any one of the court facilities, various court facilities. Understand this. I'll give you an example. Just one example that shows you how wrong-headed that opinion is. I have a probation officer who's got a defendant who's got dirty urines, so they arrest them. In the courthouse, until we had the security devices, that person would walk that person through a lobby of 20 or so other people, not knowing whether any of those 20 people are friends of that defendant. Could you appreciate in that situation that while I am escorting a defendant in handcuffs, that someone who's related to them, who doesn't want to see them go to jail, might attack me from the rear, take my gun, and shoot me? Can you foresee that?
Again,
Can you foresee it?
Those are people that the courts routinely release to be in society. Can you foresee that person being mad and beating up their neighbor?
Well, and
Okay.
part of that
Sir, I can't
discussion.
resolve all of the community's problems. I'm just trying to make sure my employees are safe.
I understand, Judge, I do.
And that's why part of the reason why when your Representative Karen Davis attends our security meetings at the Justice Center, we frequently advise her that there is insufficient security in this building. Because I'll tell you, it's just as likely that one of you may be attacked
But don't
as
we
one
take-
of my
don't we take-
probation officers.
Don't we take those prisoners out by a separate way in the Justice Center?
In the Justice Center, yes.
Yes. We take them out. There's a way of taking them so we don't pass through those folks. I mean, the scenario you just gave me here doesn't work in the courthouse because they go out through the back. There's a separate containment area in each court, and there's a separate way that they're moved through the Justice Center. So that very scenario doesn't happen.
In the
That's
Justice
true,
Center.
but it would happen in the courthouse and it would happen in your design of the Broad Street
Well,
building.
it could happen, when we say the courthouse, it could happen with probation. In the design that we submitted that you say doesn't work, and I can understand, I'm not trying to argue that. It's a square footage issue. We did have a separate employees entrance. We did have a separate entrance for moving the prisoners around that didn't go through the lobby. Okay, we did try to do some of that stuff, so we did recognize some of it. We may not have done it the way it needed to be done completely, but we did try to identify that.
The plan has a single entrance, it has a second exit, but understand the rules of superintendents tell us that court facilities are not allowed to have two separate entrances because that's an additional security issue. So while you suggested that might reduce the security problem, the Supreme Court and our Sheriff's Department believes it increases it. Otherwise, I think we'd have a lot of people going in and out of the back door of the Justice Center without proper security procedures. Because if there was a back door for employees and deliveries, it wouldn't be a security problem. But I'm telling you, Captain Drozdowski will tell you, he doesn't want people going in and out of that back door without either some form of security or monitoring.
Well, the monitoring we were going to use was a swipe system. When we looked at it, we had assumed that since they were allowed to carry their guns, that they were trustworthy people that didn't have to go through a metal detector, so we made for an entrance for those folks. I think it was a reasonable assumption. It may not have been something that at the end of the day that was agreeable, but they're carrying their weapons inside the facility as it is, so why would they have to go through security?
Well, and quite frankly, we could get to that issue and 50 other more if we sat down and you guys could actually, you may not agree with us, but at least you'll understand why we're saying what we're saying. You may not agree at the end of the day that our officers need an office the size that we've indicated, but we will be able to and should explain to you each and everything that we've asked for, and you should have a clear understanding of that. And quite frankly, I think that gives you all the ammunition you need, whether you want to attack the court in public or attack us legally, if things don't work out. Nothing is lost other than perhaps some time by us sitting down and becoming educated as to what the needs are and where we can go from there.
So you're willing to say that even though you have concerns, that as you look at the Broad Street location, you think there is a possibility that it could work?
Commissioner, absolutely the Broad Street will work. I will tell you we physically won't fit, all of us won't fit in there. But if you guys decide that that is the location, we will absolutely make that work. And I think it is best that you have that information as to why.
My concern is that that ultimately you want the Justice Center.
No.
And then if we do build the Broad Street location, that you're still going to refuse to send people over there.
That's not our option, Commissioner. Legally, if you build the Broad Street location, we have to come. Now, whether we can put all the people in there, that's really what you're going to find out if we sit down and talk.
And more notably, and this is one of the issues that I keep on battling with, ignoring the man cave issue. Why don't you want them in the Justice Center? Every deputy I ever talked to about this issue since the county fair last year is saying, why are we fighting about this? Why shouldn't they be in that building? I talked to lawyers on both sides, prosecutors and defense, and they don't understand why you folks won't let us go into that building, especially since we're going to pay about 70% of the costs, and it's not going to be taxpayer money paying that 70%.
You know, Judge, I got to disagree with not taxpayers' money. Every nickel that's taken in by this county is taxpayers' money in one form or another. You keep saying it's not taxpayers' money. It's like saying the recorder's fees aren't taxpayers' money. The conveyance fees on titles isn't taxpayers' money.
They're not general fund money. That would be a better accurate statement.
But it's all money that belongs, that derives from the
Well, I think there's a
taxpayer.
distinction between a taxpayer money and a user fee money, and that's what we're planning on using.
It's still paid by the taxpayers.
Yeah,
No, it's paid by the users of the court system.
well, that person could be theoretically
No,
a
I understand.
taxpayer.
They're not
all
But-
taxpayers, I know
Yeah.
that.
How about
I
we say
understand that.
it's not general fund money?
Now, you ask in regards to being the fifth floor.
Yes.
I can give I have concerns there, especially with tying onto your dialogue currently about these type of people who are felons necessarily, all bundled up, going into a place where I have necessarily friends, families, constituents. We gotta change it.
We need a tape change. Just put everything on pause for just a minute, please. All right.
Okay.
You were speaking, sir.
Thank you. My concern in regards to the fifth floor, actually the operations of probation over there, and tying right onto your conversation, these constituents and/or slash felons, as you said, roaming through the Justice Center once they get through the security into all the other departments. We have probate, where we have widows going up there to take care of their cases, where you have been running through. And I remember the old courthouse back in the early 80s. We all know the situation with my father. I remember who was all roaming around when there was no security whatsoever. But they're going through that place. You've got domestic relations cases. You've got children in the facility. I sort of have an issue. I like having probation off-site, is my personal preference, not to be disturbing the rest of our constituents who are using the justice system, hopefully for better purposes that the justice system is there for. whether it be having to go through a divorce, domestic issue, custody issues, probate issues, because we know you do more civil work than you do criminal work in all the courts.
Traffic issues.
Correct. Civil is 70% of it.
Traffic, you mean movement of people, or traffic meaning traffic violations?
No, I mean, when tickets are given to use, they have to go to the court there.
But you have more civil cases in the
I think the juvenile court
courthouse.
actually does that elsewhere. Kristen, is it
Right.
is it in that building?
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you have more civil cases. If I remember the old figures, when you were running for judge, it was 70-30, if I remember the old days of civil. It was about
Probably still
70-30
is,
mix.
more or
So
less.
It's more civil than it is criminal cases running through there. I just feel better that it's offsite. I spoke to a lot of county commissioners across the state, and when I did my poll of from 5 to 15, I think 8 of those were off-site and not in their justice center. And those were larger communities. They were in other buildings other than where they held their courts at. And I went from Lucas to Delaware, I think is 6 to 16 or 5 to 15. And I did send that correspondence over to our legal in regards to security and funding. I was always a proponent of redoing the old courthouse. I love that old building. I think that is a gem of downtown Larry, one of the most, recognizable buildings. But that didn't seem to work out because we couldn't relocate you and issues with that involving with everything you came up with, all your issues in regards to environmental that we didn't really have that was, they weren't all gonna drop over dead and die from being in the building. There were issues that had to be addressed, I agree, but it's also a 150-year-old building. That's where I still think, currently, since the courthouse isn't in, I don't believe adult probation belongs in the Justice Center. I don't believe that element belongs there. When I've got my constituents walking in there with their widows, mothers handling a probate case, or they're taking their children through the building. Okay, that's my personal belief, and I'm allowed to have that.
I understand, but just to make sure you understand factually some of those issues, you ought to discuss that with Judge Walther, because Judge Walther regularly has felons in his court.
I know he does.
He is the Veterans Court judge, and those are generally people who have been convicted of a felony but are being supervised.
And he does
also
felony
handles the
child support.
non-support cases, and so many of those are
I know.
felons as well.
I've had
And so they go
discussions.
into the probate court on Wednesdays and whatever day he has his Veterans Court. I will tell you that even though the case volume would suggest to you that the civil docket is the majority of the people coming in, it's generally just the opposite. On Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, 2 judges in the general division have their pretrials. There's probably, each of us have 40 pretrials that day. So there would be 80 pretrials on a Monday, a Wednesday, and a Friday. In comparison, we probably have 10 civil trials the whole week. The fact of the matter is, because the court docket requires criminal matters to be resolved faster, the volume in that building is defendants in criminal cases. That's the majority of the volume. And so
For
the
the general, for the Court of Common Pleas.
That's correct.
Okay.
With the domestic relations, obviously not so, but they also have the juvenile court, and those individuals, although never considered felons, may have previously gone through an adjudication process regarding felony charges. But the fact of the matter is that, at least as we look at these plans, the biggest distinction is that, number one, we have security at the front door that's much better. There's a desire by the security department, or the committee there, to increase the number of TV monitors. It's never going to be as safe as we in the building want it to be, and it's not as safe as we in the security committee want it to be.
And it will be,
but it is
let me interrupt though,
safer.
as you're saying, because you came into my conversation, but we're also saying it's never going to be as safe as, whereas we have these parolees that are 1,080 cases a month, approximately, based on the numbers you gave me, 12 parole time 80, 1,080.
Yes.
That 1,080 would be walking in a separate building, handling their probation issues, and a small percentage of those would then have to be taken over to the Justice Center to walk into the rest of my constituencies.
But they have to
Correct.
do that now. Before somebody can legally be put on probation,
They have to see
they've
the-
been in the Justice Center half a dozen times. So every single one of those persons is, your concern absolutely makes sense to try to minimize that, but at the end of the day, we're not. Those people have free reign at the Justice Center, and in fact are frequenting the Justice Center because they don't get to probation until they have gone through the course with the court, and that's.
But once they go through that course the 6 times, let's say, I don't know
Sure,
how long probation is, 90 days, 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever you may be.
Yep.
They then don't go back to the Justice Center.
Correct.
Center necessarily. They go to an off-site location. So if you have an issue with this singular person out of the 1,080 or 3 cases or 10, I don't know how many guys violate probation and end up back in your court.
Sure.
I really don't. 10%, 20%?
20.
Okay, so you got 200 people then going back. The other 880 aren't coming back.
And many of those 200 might actually be in handcuffs at the time because they're at the county jail.
Okay.
And transported by the sheriff's department and held in holding cells.
So, I mean, the volume of not having those people there aren't in that
Sure.
Justice Center with everybody else who is performing their duties.
Sure.
I would love to have that conversation about the appropriateness of putting all of the felons in one building as opposed to 3 buildings or 2 buildings or whatever. All I can tell you is.
I wouldn't disagree with putting all the felons in one building, as long as I didn't have my probate there, or my domestic relations, and some counties have separate facilities, DRs and separate facilities and what they do with their felony court. I'm not arguing that point. I wasn't here when the Justice Center got designed. I can only go back, the records, the minutes Teresa produced to show us what the thinking was, it was done. I've got a lot of old judges who are friends on what the thinking was, that it didn't go there, wasn't located there. You're the only judge who was there back then, Judge. That it wasn't meant to be in that building. The agreement was it shouldn't be in that building. That's everything I've been told. I've talked to
I
past
understand.
judges, so I can only tell you what I'm shown and what I've seen through the justice system over the years, and my feelings personally on how I think it should be handled. I'm not comfortable putting the felony probation in the 5th floor. If it came down to it and we got sued and we had to vote on it, I'm still gonna be a no vote, even if I'm required to vote yes, because I don't think it's the right place to go.
Commissioner, Judge, this is an interesting question, and it goes to what you asked before, Commissioner Lundy. You asked us whether or not we would be amenable to be open to sitting down to all the issues that are on the table. Does the same apply to you guys? Are you saying now, absolutely, it's off the table?
Now, you know my personal, and I had this
Sure.
discussion with Judge Burge and yourself.
Sure.
2 years ago in 2013 in Judge Burge's office when we got together
Yeah.
to make the discussion. I said I was very uncomfortable, and I'm not comfortable putting it in that Justice Center.
If
that
we-
had nothing to do with any research discussion, I wasn't comfortable.
And I would just tell you, just to speak to that specific issue, because I know that it was raised in the litigation. The fact of the matter is, I wanted that probation department in that building, and it's my understanding that we were advised, I was at least advised as a judge who was not the administrative judge at that time, that the commissioners did not want the probation department to be in that building. I have since found out over the last couple months that in fact, it may in fact been the judges who were in charge of our departments, because having an expandable 5th floor without the probation department would increase the likelihood of judgeships being created and less opposition in campaigns. Although I saw your agreement, I think.
Yeah, I agree
would
with you,
with
Judge.
that?
You and I were.
That is
We're the only
that's a
veterans of the whole-
selfish issue, isn't it?
We're the only veterans of the whole process with the Justice Center. I think it's just you and me left, isn't it kind of strange?
It's a horror story for so many people.
Yes, I understand.
277,000 people, maybe.
But let's also, let's also weigh in with this. The prosecutor's office had a tremendous input on that, too. The prosecutor's office at the time did not want adult probation there because they were worried about their prosecutors interlacing with the people that they had convicted or were trying to convict, or were already, because some of the probationers are in court too. They also have pending matters. So the prosecutor's office had a lot to do with that, as well as the judges.
And I don't know what Prosecutor Will's position is in that regard.
We
It
haven't
was
talked about this
it was
pre him.
his predecessor, Gregory White, and he and I disagreed on many things, so this is not that unique.
I think you ran against him, didn't you?
Yeah.
96.
That was the last smart decision made by the voters regarding me.
Judge, if I can make this suggestion, I think those are all factors in weighing what is the better decision. You know, Commissioner, your concerns should absolutely be included in the factoring, but I think as you put all those down, you weigh those, which is more expensive, which is more economical, what about efficiencies, what about your concerns about those people being in the building more?
It's a quality of life issue that oversteps all the other issues you brought up.
That is certainly.
Whether it's $1 million more or $2 million more for a long-term fix for adult probation. Again, when I have my residents walking through the halls of that Justice Center who are not felons, and there's a smaller percentage would be there being an off-site probation department.
Yep.
And with other discussions I've had with my colleagues around the state, I believe it being off-site is best in everyone's interest. Maybe not for direct management
Sure.
of yourself or Beth or however your
I get it.
management structure is set. Maybe you have to have an email or a Skype or a video thing necessarily on how you do your things. But I worked an economic development deal with a gentleman in Strongsville this morning, my Port Authority, my Community Development, Solid Waste, all at the same time between 7:50 and 8:15 today. And wherever they were on the road, because we all have cell phones and availability. So I kind of, the managing over,
Yep, I get it.
Those are discussions.
Commissioner, I would never suggest that your concerns should be minimized. They could, in your mind, always be number one, and at the end of the day, that may say in your mind, everything else falls in second or third. I would suggest that without sitting down and talking to us, if you don't know what our issues are, then I think we're left with, you select Broad Street, we litigate, you find out what our needs are at that point in time, and then it gets very expensive, and we'll still be in Broad Street, but it's just a very expensive proposition, and the whole department doesn't get moved over. I don't know.
And irrespective of the issues of our needs for the probation department, we've never really had an opportunity to discuss with the commissioners as a group, or each of you individually to any great extent, the other advantages we see in placing them in that building. I could make an argument, seeing as how you have always been a strong advocate for economic development, that there's an economic development issue with regard to this that would potentially trump your theory of issues about innocent citizens congregating in the same hallways as accused and or convicted felons. One of the difficulties is the decision to put the criminal court system in with the other courts was made by your predecessors,
We live with
if
the
I
sins of
recall
the
correctly.
past.
Yeah, and so we're both sort of stuck in that regard.
No, you were there.
Yeah,
was-
but obviously,
you were there.
obviously, I didn't have much input.
It wasn't, really, the judges didn't, there was a real quick talk about actually dividing the Justice Center into two halves for a while, and then it was felt it wasn't, at the time, the money was an issue.
And I'm not privy to that conversation, but I don't doubt that,
Yeah,
sir.
by the time the judges came in for the design issues, they had decided on a unified facility. And it may well have served the public better had it been a divided facility, because you could have had one side of it domestics, another side of it common pleas. You just have separate entrances into the facility and we walled off, so to speak. But there wasn't funding for that at the time.
Let's just say this, because Timmy keeps on bringing me back to the point he wants to make sure we both make. You folks have to make a decision as to whether you wish to discuss with us the various issues with regard to the building itself and the problems we have discussed or mentioned to you with regard to the building identified, and also the broader issue of where do we put a probation department. And this is not the forum. Not that I am worried about a public forum. I have no qualms about that. And I don't know that we have any alternative in that regard anyway. But the fact of the matter is there may be other people who are waiting to make comments, and they're thinking, Betleski took up my
They
3
left.
minutes.
They
Well,
left. They'll be back next week.
then
Terry
these guys
Sue-
are all just watching a traffic accident and enjoying and waiting till the police show. Either way, all we ask is a commitment from you folks to meet, to talk about it, and to get an understanding of why we want an office to be this size, why we need extra bathrooms for the testing of defendants, why we think it works better. I'll tell you that the $900,000 that you would put into that, we're still of that position, even though your price has gone from 900 to 1.2, is because this guarantees you will get $1 million worth of improvements made to the 5th floor on the area that we are not developing. So you would pay $900,000. We would give you $1 million worth of improvements on the other half of the 5th floor, so that when the commissioners decided, if necessary, to expand into that 5th floor, you'd have a baseline of certain wiring, plumbing, you name it. So all we ask is, please, give us an opportunity to sit down and talk with you about it. We'll have a better understanding of your positions. You'll have a better understanding of our positions. We may agree to disagree. We may agree to agree on some portions, but not all. But the fact of the matter is if we don't talk, that stuff that we did with regard to we're going to repeat what the difficulty we've got in the Supreme Court right now. Because clearly, and I wasn't the administrative judge, but we'll never get to the conclusion of who started what. But certainly there were aggressive acts taken by both parties with regard to this, and that's cost us money. And so I keep on trying to approach this with less aggressive conduct, although it may not appear that way at the podium today. But I admit and apologize that I'm a bit frustrated because I keep on saying, let's meet and talk. And Timmy's now said it 4 or 5 times. And so I don't think we can reiterate it exponentially and expect any kind of change position. So you folks make your decision, and you let us know.
Well, I think it was our intent to meet with you after your architect went through the building to see what the discrepancies were, so the only reason we went forward was because we didn't think you needed to meet.
Okay.
We didn't receive that letter, that March or that February letter, so I don't have a problem meeting.
No, not at all. I just want to be clear, though, so there's no interest in defraying the cost for the Broad Street location. Is that correct? Did I hear that correctly?
I guess what I'd say to you is that I've been too long involved, as Mr. Cordes, but maybe not with regard to the issue of litigation. I never say never. And so I will just tell you that from our perspective, we find that there's a significant number of inefficiencies. And then I understand the technology can address some of those. There's no question about that. But the fact of the matter is that there are inefficiencies that won't be rectified. The security, a separate security, it won't be rectified, et cetera. So we can talk about it. I'm open to anything, Mr. Lundy.
You know, I know we had a healthy and robust conversation today, to say the least, but you know, I just think it's important that, you know, that obviously we stick to the issue. We don't let personalities get in the way and try to find a way to resolve this as quickly as possible. And I know that, you know, in our executive session, we're going to have some conversation with our attorneys about things, but I'm certainly open to, you know, having the, you know, the sit down and going through everything. So, but like I said, I just think the taxpayers expect better of us. I'm new to this whole thing, and I know that you have needs, and I don't want to minimize what those needs are for the employees to get their jobs done. I understand your concerns, that you're passionate about those concerns, as are commissioners passionate about their position on things, and sometimes there's no other route but to deal with it legally, because sometimes that's the only way it can be done. But I really think on this matter, I still think we can find some common ground, but we have to go into the discussion with the understanding that the Justice Center is not the only option.
Absolutely. And I think if you come to understand our position on our needs and why we're suggesting what they are, our hope is that you go, okay, you still may go to Broad Street, but at least you'll understand why we say we need an office of this size or that. And it won't be out of lack of information that you're making your decisions. So it sounds like we're going to wait to hear from you as to when you want to meet. You'll notify us. Yep. And we welcome that dialogue. Thank you, Commissioners.
I apologize. Anybody else who wish to comment?
I have a question, Tim. Can you send days that your judges are available, because you have dockets?
Absolutely. Usually Tuesdays are we do our judges meeting Tuesdays at lunch. So if that can meet into your schedule, into the scheduling, that'd be great. I would suggest, at least for the initial meeting, and we can have subsequent ones, I would envision that the first meeting is really informational, where you're asking us questions and we're providing information. And I would suggest that all the judges present at that, they don't have all the details. So if we can agree that the administrative judge and yourselves will be present, whatever, I would bring my probation department. Mr. Cordes obviously is going to have information, Karen Davis. So if we can have that group start the discussions, and then depending on if there is debates about components, we would bring the other judges in. So that perhaps initial meeting can be more flexible because we don't need all the judges there.
And we would not anticipate bringing our attorney.
Yeah.
And I know the judges are very busy, so as far as I'm concerned, if you want to meet on a Saturday or Sunday, let's do that.
Saturday is fine with me. It really is. I think that the only issue is, can we find an open building? But, you know, find a small conference room in a local restaurant.
Sundays are actually better for me. Saturdays I like to sell carpet.
Sunday is fine too. As long as
So
it's after
whatever works
12.
for you guys, let us know, please.
Yes, please. Thank you very much, and I appreciate your indulgence.
Anybody else? Terry, you might as well come up, huh? You waited this long, right?
Had to check my watch, see if it was still morning.
Hope you don't end up in my court.
Yes, sir, I know. No, I apologize. Thank you very much. Mr. Jose Torres told me last night he was going to be here, so I thought I'd come. But just briefly, I just wanted to ask Mr. Cordes if you had any conversation to try to look at that one other building that
I
you
have.
and us talked
I've been trying to get in there.
Okay.
Unsuccessfully. It's funny how somebody urgently wants to sell something, and then you got to beat their door down. I will tell you that the pricing is in an area that I think we have good ability to negotiate.
Okay.
As you know, the tenant though has a right to stay there to the end of the 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just trying to get in to see the building, and as I told Karen that you obviously be with us. So as soon as I can arrange it, I will. It's not something that's off my docket. It just they haven't given us dates to get in there. I think because they have tenants occupying
they
the
don't
building,
want
it's
us
been a little
going
more
in there
challenging.
while they've got business going on.
If I could interrupt just for a minute, and if it's, legally, we're allowed to go into executive session to discuss purchase and real estate and things of that matter, right? My concern always is when we have, I'm a big believer in transparency, but I also don't want to be driving up the price on something we're going to potentially
Right.
purchase
Right.
by discussing it in an open
Yeah.
forum. And if it's okay, with my colleagues, I'd probably prefer, as we've done in the past, have you come into executive session and discuss real estate.
Yeah.
Well,
I
that
actually
was
have
just a
actually-
question: is what is progress?
Yeah, I
in
have
doing
asked
that?
on the potential sale and purchase of real estate under my business. So that was one of the things I wanted to kind of talk about. So, if there's no more public comment, if you take us into exec, we can go talk to
Right.
Terry.
And then did you get my other information I sent you on that other location that
I did. I haven't done anything with it, Terry. It's sitting on my desk because
Okay.
I was trying to nail this one down.
Right, because I looked at that yesterday myself. So.
Okay. Well, why don't we talk inside?
Okay, that sounds good. And other than that, that's all I wanted to say, really. It was just to see where we were at with that, because we're, like the judges, my bosses have been asking me if I've had any contact, and I said no. They would be more than willing to sit down and have some kind of meeting too. And Saturday and Sunday's fine with them too, I'm sure.
But you would have a few minutes to join us.
Yes, sir.
Today,
Yes.
like after our meeting
Yes,
here?
I
Okay.
can join you.
All right.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Terry.
Anybody else? Seeing none, I move we go into executive session as outlined by both the county administrator and the county prosecutor.
Second.
Ms.
Is that
Kowski.
the
Aye.
paper?
Mr. Lundy.
Aye.
This has been a broadcast of the recent Lorain County Commissioners' General Meeting. Unless otherwise announced, meetings are held Wednesday morning at 9:30 at the Administration Building, 226 Middle Avenue, 4th floor, downtown Elyria. These are public meetings, and you are invited to attend. Agendas are posted prior to the meeting at www.loraincounty.us. Click on Departments to see the Commissioners page, then click on View Agenda for a printable copy of the agenda.